I wasn't planning on making a video about this, but it's been 2.5 weeks and I'm gonna talk about it. On February 7th, 2024, Thomas Jordan IV died. And I did not really know this man, but I'd like to talk about it because it was 2.5 weeks ago, and I'd like to talk about it. I woke up at like 6 in the morning, and I I leave for work. If it's a normal day, I leave for work at 7 in the morning. I have a work vehicle. It's very heavy, a lot of equipment, and I left at 7 in the morning. I punch into Google Maps how to get to the office, and I know how to get to the office, but I always punch it into Google Maps because I live in Northern California, in the Sacramento area. I'm new to the Sacramento area. I'm from the Bay Area. Doesn't matter. But I punch into Google Maps how to get to work because sometimes there's car accidents on the freeway and it's like take the back roads, otherwise you're screwed. So like on this day, there was a car accident on 80 or whatever, and it was like take the back roads, and I'm like, okay. So I go take the back roads and I'm driving, and I'm like 20 minutes, 15 minutes into my drive, and I'm on like a one lane highway where it's like, one lane in either direction. And there was a storm the previous night, so there's a lot of water on the road, and there was like a big puddle, and I was like kind of looking forward to it because big puddles are fun to drive through. And I drive through this big puddle. My son just walked in the room. My youngest son, Elliot. I drive through this big puddle, and my tire lost 10 psi in this big puddle. It was dramatic, and I was like, whoa. I thought it was going to be fun to drive through the puddle, and then it became like this whoa moment of extreme intensity. And I lost 10 psi in my front right tire immediately from driving through this puddle. Up ahead, like 100 meters, there's another puddle, and there's a car stopped with hazard lights. And so I stop behind the car because anytime there's hazard lights, I stop, put on my hazard lights, and go investigate to be like, are you okay? Do you need help? And so I stop, and I was like, hey, buddy, what's going on? I get out of my car, and the guy points in a direction, and I look, and I see this. I took a single photo. I didn't want to take a photo. I didn't want to take a lot of photos. It felt disrespectful. But I took a single photo to text to my boss to be like, hey, I'm going to be busy for a while. I got to deal with this. I'm not leaving this person. And this is what I see. When I saw it, I put my hands on my head and started breathing really heavily because I knew that there was a dead person in that car, or a car full of dead people. It was impossible to survive this. And it was weird because it was like, it wasn't dramatic, it was subtle. And the dude in front of me was named Shane. His last name was like Berthal or Bernthal, something like that. But Shane's on the phone with 911, so I was there like a minute after him. He's on the phone with 911, and he's telling them blah, 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 blah. And I was like, Shane, tell them there's a dead person in this car. Like, and Shane didn't. I kind of got upset with him. It's not his fault. I'm not mad at him. But in the moment, I was like, Shane, you need to tell them there's a dead person in this car. This is a body retrieval. There's no surviving this. The car, when I drove through the puddle and lost 10 psi in my tire, and I'm in a big heavy work vehicle, this is a car. It's not a big heavy work vehicle. Whoever was in this car hit the puddle and then veered to the shoulder. It's a bunch of like soggy, muddy reeds, and the car slid for like 90 feet because you could see all the reeds bent over like Sherlock Holmes. And you could just tell that because the car was upside down, you're like, okay, the car hit the puddle, slid off the road, flipped, 180 degrees, and was upside down in this water. And I was like, there's no way you could survive that. And so I told Shane when he was on the phone with 911, like, Shane, tell them he's dead, or whoever is in this car. Body retrieval, Shane. And Shane didn't, because he was hopeful. God bless him. Shane is like one of those salt of the earth people. We're from California, and California gets a lot of shit, but like there's a lot of good folk in California, you know? And Shane couldn't tell the 911 dispatch that like it was obviously a dead person because he didn't want to believe it. God bless him. But I was like, I put my hands over my head and started breathing heavily, which is something I've never done in my entire life. It was involuntary because I knew. I was like, there's a dead person in this car, maybe a car full of dead people. I don't know. It was like 7:20 in the morning. And yeah. So then I wait with Shane for the men to arrive. And Shane was happy with me, even though he was sad. Shane was happy with me because he was like, no one else stopped. All these cars are driving by. No one gives a fuck. And I didn't know what to say to Shane. I just stayed with him. I took this single photo to tell my boss, like, I'm not leaving this person. I'm just going to wait for, like, the real men to arrive. It was freezing. It was 40 degrees and windy. It was freezing. We just had a storm the previous night that was epic. And it was freezing. I'm waiting for the cops and the fire department to arrive. It was like an hour later, and I can see them in the distance driving the wrong way because visibility was good. And they're driving the wrong way. And Shane and I are like trying to like coordinate. I told them, I was like, hey, it's on Nicholas Road, right where it becomes Markham. I had it on my GPS, I had it marked. And I was like, we're trying to get the cops to show up to the correct place. And then what happened was a blue truck from the same direction I was traveling and Shane was traveling is coming up. And this blue truck like swerves and brakes dramatically. And they stop dramatically. And then like this truck basically is like screeching tires, like coming up on us hard, and like swerves and brakes in front of the vehicles. And then this lady gets out of the car. It's a truck. And this lady gets out of the car and she's like, that's his car. And she's like screaming and wailing in a way that I can't explain how it sounded, but it sounded bad. And she's like screaming, that's his car, and he left at 5 a.m. And she like runs up to I'm standing like 5 feet away from this car. And she's like screaming and wailing, that's his car, and he left at 5 a.m. and she's like running up, and she gets into this water, and it's like 40 degrees freezing and windy, and she gets into the water, and it's like neck deep, and she's screaming in a way that I cannot express how dramatic it was. She's like screaming and wailing, and it's hopeless, and she's neck deep in freezing water, and like her screams were like, they were intense. And like we get her out of the water, me and Shane, we get her out of the water, and then like another kid rolls up, and he's like screaming dad, as though the person in the car is going to answer him, and it's hopeless, and he screams dad. And like Shane and I get the lady out of the water. She's he's like screaming dad, as though his dad is in there and gonna answer him, and he's not. And after we get his mother out of the water, which was freezing, this son, I think his name is Owen, I'm not certain, it's the middle son. Owen puts his foot ankle deep in this freezing cold water, and I grabbed his hand because he's right next to me, and I was like, don't, it's okay. It wasn't okay. As the only thing I said to him was, don't, it's okay. I never said anything to this family. And I was so upset that they saw this, because I was like, this is bad. But I told him, don't, it's okay. and he didn't continue into the water neck deep like his mother did in a hopeless situation. But he was a good son. He was going to follow his mother into neck deep freezing water for a hopeless cause, and he was a good son. He was the good son. The oldest son stayed by the truck, screaming as well. And about 10 minutes later, the cops and the fire department showed up. Highway patrol removed the family from the car. They were like, go back to your truck. Let's talk about it. As a complete stranger who doesn't know these people, but lives in the community and cares, as a complete stranger, it was really obvious to me that this man was tremendously loved and important. It was really obvious to me as a complete stranger that, like, that woman who was neck deep in freezing water loved the shit out of that man. And that, the son loved the shit out of that man. I left like 15 minutes after the fire department and the police showed up. I left. I went to work. I was like Googling who was this person for days. I found reports that were wrong. Reports were like, oh, he crashed at 7:20. I'm like, no, he didn't. He crashed at 5:20 because he left the house at 5. I found him, or Shane and I found him at 7:20. And the news reports were wrong, and they didn't say his name, and it was just like bullshit. And then like a week later, because I was searching every day, being like, who was this man whose family loved him tremendously? Who was this man? And it was Thomas Jordan IV. I found it on GoFundMe. And he left behind like 3 sons and a 4-month-old daughter or a 5-month-old daughter. Her and like the suffering I saw them experience was like too much. It was too much. It was so intense. When they showed up and they were in the water and screaming, Shane walked away, and God bless him, he's a good old boy, salt of the earth country boy. And I love those type of Americans. I love country boy Americans. They're my favorite. They're like the salt of the earth. And Shane like walked away 40, 50 feet. He was like, I gotta get away from this family just screaming and wailing. And I couldn't. I just stood there, froze 5 feet away from the car when they were doing it. I couldn't walk away from it. But Shane was like, he had to walk away from it. I don't blame him. After I grabbed the son's arm and I was like, okay, don't do it. Like they got back to the car and they were kind of calming down. And I walked over to Shane and I was like, that was emotionally intense. Shane said nothing. He was there. He was happy I stopped to support him emotionally, but like, it was like too much. The only reason I know who this man was because the GoFundMe, which, it showed me who this person was, who I knew was loved intensely. I really wish the family hadn't seen that, because it wasn't glorious. It was very subtle. It's not like an explosion or a hail of gunfire. It was like very subtle. It was not dramatic to see it was just like, oh, that sucks. It wasn't glorious. It was like cruel and scary. He would have, because he left at 5 a.m. and it's winter, it would have been completely dark. It would have been completely dark when he hit the puddle. It would have been completely dark when he went off the shoulder. It would have been completely dark when he flipped 180 degrees upside down in the water. It would have been completely dark. It was impossible. There were like reeds on the left and right. You couldn't go through the windows. You couldn't go through the windshield. You couldn't go through the trunk. It would have been so cold and dark. And like, Such an impossible situation to survive. And like, he left behind 3 sons that loved the fuck out of him, and a daughter and a wife that loved the shit out of him, and like, I'll never be able to get those screams out of my head. And I'm not like a victim. I'm not trying to be like, oh, pat me on the back. I'm suffering. I'm like, I'm not suffering. I just am acknowledging that, like, that family loved the shit out of him and suffered the greatest loss they possibly could, to be honest. And I was like riding shotgun watching it, and I wish I had said something better than like, don't, it's okay, because like, it wasn't okay. Yeah. I like didn't want to talk about this, but part of me was like, hey, Thomas Jordan IV, as a complete stranger, it was really obvious that you were a good man and that your family loved the fuck out of you. It was so obvious to me as a stranger. And like, obviously you were a good man. It's impossible to not know that you were a good man. And I'm a complete stranger. I don't know these people. I just live in the community that they live in, and I care, and like, they love the fuck out of you, man. You were obviously a good dad. And it's really unfair this happened to you. And I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'll put a link to the GoFundMe in the video. Please donate, because the GoFundMe was asking for 20,000, and I'm like, that's not enough for this man. It should be like 100 or 200 or 1,000,000, but like, it's not enough for this man for 20,000. Like, it's not enough. It's not even anywhere near enough. Yeah, like, God bless you and your family, and I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Obviously, you'll be missed. Yeah. Yeah.